So first thing, we're looking at multiplying and dividing radicals. This is section 1.3. So this first part on your notes, it's just some general rules where A and B are numbers. So for example, say A is 2. If I take the square root of 2, and then B, say that's 3, the square root of 3, then I could combine into one radical and multiply the radicands, which would really be the square root of 6. So I could simplify that into the square root of 6, and that's how you multiply. However, sometimes you get the same number. So say I take the square root of 2 times the square root of 2. I do that same process, but now it's the square root of 2 times 2 is the same as 2 squared. And we know that a square and a square root are opposite operations, so those would cancel and would just be left with 2, just the number underneath, our original number. So let's do one like this. If I have some number, let's say 2, and then B is another number, let's say 3. C is another number, let's say 4. And D is another number, let's say 5. So I would multiply these leading numbers. So 2 times 4 in the front. And then I would multiply the radicands, the B and the D, the numbers underneath. So 3 times 5. And when I simplify that, I would have 2 times 4, which is 8, and then the radicand becomes 15. So those are multiplication properties. Let's look at division. So division, if I have the square root of some number on the numerator and the square root of some number on the denominator, I can make that one square root with a fraction as the radicand. So this next one, actually these two, these are ones we use when it asks us to rationalize the denominator. We're going to use these two. So what that means, rationalize the denominator, that means that the denominator in our end answer is not a radical. So denominator is not a radical. And that's just proper form in math. That's why we're doing this. So let's take this first one. I have the square root of some number over the square root of another number. And I'm going to multiply the numerator and the denominator by whatever's on the bottom. So I'm just going to recopy this. I have the square root of 2 over the square root of 3. And then I'm going to multiply by the denominator, square root of 3 over the square root of 3. So what that does is I'm multiplying by 1, just in a weird way. So on the numerator, I use our multiplication. 2 times 3 is 6. And then on the denominator, I use our other multiplication that we just learned. And I'm just left with 3. And this would be the simplified version with a rationalized denominator. Let's do another one. Let's say I just have a number on the numerator, and then I have a radical on the denominator. So we don't want a radical on the denominator, so we're going to rationalize it. So I'm right here, I'm going to multiply by the denominator, and I have to do that to both the numerator and the denominator. So when I have a number and a radical, I just write them next to each other. 4 times the square root of 3 over Square root of 3 times the square root of 3 is just 3. And that would be our answer. Okay, so these are just a lot of rules, and we'll keep going back to those. And then